Sorry, just waiting on John. Bon après-midi à tous et bienvenue à cette audience du comité de dérogation pour la ville d'Ottawa. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. This is a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment, Panel 1 for the urban area. We are a City of Ottawa quasi-judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variances and consents to sever land. Our hearings are back to being in person. It's the summer, so we have fewer people in the audience today. Totally understand that. But the committee does make available to anyone who is interested remote participation by video conferencing, and all you really need to do is speak with committee staff about making that happen. We are live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public on the committee's website. My name is Anne Tremblay, and I'll be chairing the hearing today. With me in person, we have a member Lecuyer, and we have member Keklikin, and online we have member Blatherwick and member Coakley. So in terms of the procedures, there's an agenda, as you saw at the beginning, that was on the screen. From time to time, we vary that order. We will do that today, so we won't go in the order of the applications that you saw on the agenda. I want you to know that the panel members have reviewed all of the materials related to the applications before us today, including the planning reports and any of the written submissions, either in support or in opposition. Today, we're going to hear any oral submissions that anyone wants to approach the committee with. And of course, we'll take all of that evidence into consideration in our decision. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant is required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. And if we don't have that, if either a confirmation in writing through a declaration, we can do either a solemn oath or affirmation. And if we can't get either, then the application in question cannot go forward. The panel may ask for a brief presentation from the applicant, followed by questions to the applicant and to city staff. Then we hear from the public, starting with those that are on my speakers list, and then we offer an opportunity to anyone else who might have an interest in the application. If you're on the list, the speakers list, it's fine. I know your name and your address. That's already been provided. If your name is not on the speakers list, I will ask you to start by providing us with your name, and you may need to spell it for us for the record, and your municipal address. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes. Any exceptions are at my discretion. At the end of the hearing on an application, the panel may either make an oral decision or we can reserve on a decision. Reserving doesn't mean we don't make a decision. It just means that we deliberate further today and then make a decision after the hearing has been adjourned here. Within 10 days, and in all cases, the Committee of Adjustment will send an official written decision and reasons for it to all parties, participants, or anyone else who has requested a copy of that decision. So we have a number of business items to take care of. The first one being declarations of conflict of interest. Anyone on the panel have any declarations for any items on this agenda or on the agendas of either the panels 2 or 3? Not seeing any, so we have no declarations of conflict of interest for the record. And I don't believe we have any minutes either. No minutes. Okay, so we're going to go to the first type of application, which is withdrawals and or adjournments, and we have both today. So starting then with number 7, which is 304, 305 Donald. On that application, we have a withdrawal not looking for any presentation or any kind of confirmation by the applicant at this point. We just want to note that that application has been formally withdrawn. We also have an adjournment, which is number 9 for 370 Princeton Avenue. Wondering if Mr. Sewer is available. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My understanding is it's been through your request for an adjournment. So do you want to just briefly explain that, please?
Correct. Yeah. So we're just requesting a 2-week adjournment. We received comments from city staff and from the planning forester with regards to the trees in the corner side yard and the corresponding corner side yard setback, and comments related to the site functionality and the design of the circulation on the site. And so these are items that we're currently working with our forester and our architect to resolve. Ms. Linker reached out to us quite early on in the process. We've already gotten that underway. And so we just kind of need the 2 weeks of time to essentially work on those issues and come back to you with those issues hopefully addressed.
Mr. Sewer, you're also aware that there's been an awful lot of submissions from neighbors with concerns. Is it your intent to go back and chat with those individuals to
So-
also?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So we are aware, we spoke with the Westboro Community Association and have their comments, not only the written comments that were provided, quite detailed written comments that were provided to the committee, but also comments that, notes that we took in our meeting. And those comments are what we're going to be taking into consideration as well when we come to working on revising these applications. And we noticed there's a little bit of overlap, particularly with the trees. And so that's something that we're going to be working on as well.
Okay, so if I've understood correctly, you are in fact going to be reaching out to the neighbors as part of your redesign or consideration?
So yes, we'll likely have another meeting with the community association to speak with them. We've received the detailed comments, the written comments, and spoken already with them. So that's something that we do plan on doing.
All right. Questions from the members of the panel on this? Adjournment request is to July 17th.
Correct. That's my understanding.
All right. So there's no questions from panel members. Is there anyone in the audience or either online to speak to the adjournment? We're talking about an adjournment to July 17th. Good afternoon.
It's Tim Gray, TIMGRAY, 190 West Village Private, and I am with the Westboro Community Association. The people from Novatech were really good enough to reach out to us, and we did have a pretty meaningful conversation. But as you noted, there's a lot of concern about the application broadly. And before we met with Novatech, we hadn't got the planning report. So basically what I'm here today to say is that we're really in lockstep with that report and the issues that they brought forward. And one of the things that for a community association we're concerned about, and this all goes back to the Westboro infill study and the bylaws that were brought forward and are now in place for that. And as the community sees it, and I think to some extent the planning report, talks about this, is that we see that document. And I have I've read through the, proposals and for the, you know, the vision of Westboro that they did while they did the infill study. And I think there's a real expectation within the community that those bylaws, you know, be followed to, you know, a T. And in the documents, they talk about, you know, sorry.
Okay, we're talking about an adjournment
Yeah,
right now. So
and-
we're not
and I
going to
just
get
wanna
into the
make it
merits of
clear
any of that. So if we
Okay,
could just,
so I'm sorry, but really what I'm trying to say is that I don't think 2 weeks is long enough. They have to address some real key issues here, and it's fine, they can take the 2 weeks, but unless they address those, you know, real hardcore issues, it's not about saving a couple of trees, it's about, you know, a lot of other things. So
all right, so Mr. Gray, so we're talking about a consent application and minor variances. You're okay with the consent?
no, because
Not even with the consent?
they're very intertwined on this project. You know, the division of the property is really linked to, you know, if they get those, you know, setbacks, you know, the reduction in the setbacks. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but and I don't even know if it makes sense to me
All right,
because
thank
I'm
you,
not an
Mr. Gray.
expert.
That's okay. Then I'm going to go to, I think it's Ms. Linker on this one. Ms. Linker, okay, so you've heard a little bit of the discussion about the complexity of some of the issues. You will be obviously involved in having to respond to some of these. In your opinion, is 2 weeks sufficient, or would you prefer to see a month's timeline?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the applicant has to address the tree removal with respect to the neighbor's property. So if they're able to get that confirmation within 2 weeks, and they mentioned a redesign and meeting with the community association, if they're able to get updated plans within a week, that would be enough time for planning staff to comment. I don't know how long it would take for them to address the issues with the community association.
All right, so Mr. Sewer, back to you. It is a very short timeline.
Mhm.
How long do you think it might take you to get those? Like, I'm thinking sooner than a week that you would need to have revised plans so that the community association would have a chance to see them, not only planning staff. So what's your timeline with regards to doing revisions at this point?
So we've, like I said, you know, Ms. Linker and Mr. Barkham reached out to us quite early on in the process. So we have already had conversations with our arborist and basically got a revised tree report and correspondingly adjusted our site plan to deal with that issue. So, you know, our client also has a meeting set up with the neighboring property owner on July 5th, about 2 days. So, you know, we think that, you know, if things go smoothly, we'll be able to have everything ready in short order to meet Ms. Linker's timeline of having things in a week. So, you know, based on that, we think the 2-week adjournment would be appropriate.
Great, thank you for that then. All right, thank you, Mr. Gray. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the adjournment request to July 17th? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else come forward. So though for members of the committee, all those in favor of an adjournment to July 17th. All right, so Mr. Sewer, it's unanimous. We'll see you back on July 17th. I would encourage you strongly to be sure that you get as much information from and to the community association so that they have the opportunity to have a fulsome review before we get back here in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sewer. Okay, so the next item of business is to go to our unopposed applications. We've got a few, so we've got applications, and I don't need anybody to get up or to come to the front on this. Applications, number 3-514 Churchill Avenue North. We also have application number 590 and 92 Prince Albert. We also have application number 6-253 MacKay, and finally, application number 10 for 469 to 471 Catherine. Going to make one call out. Is there anyone who wants to speak to any of those applications, either for or against, before the committee determines? One, come on down, then. Good afternoon. Can you just tell me which application that is of concern? All right, thank you. In which case, I think we, if we can just hold for a moment with you, we're going to then take number 6 off the list of unopposed. So just to recap, what we really are looking now as unopposed is number 3, 5, and 10. Is there anyone who wants to speak to any of those before we make a decision, either for or against? No, I can't see that. So who have we got on?
Madam Chair, we have a couple speakers for item number 3, and they're going to be promoted now. They're new speakers, the first being Doretta Lewis and the second being Jessica Parnell.
Okay, so we are taking number 3 off the unopposed list at this point. Okay, so with that then, we're left with number 5. Just a minute, I just got to make some notes here. It was easy, but now it's getting a little more complicated for me. So that way, and then this one. Okay, so now we're left on number 5 and number 10. Anyone want to speak to either one of those applications before we decide? No, okay. So members of the panel, all those in favor of granting both number, Member
Chair, Madam Chair, Member Coakley is trying to attract your attention.
Oh, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Quite all right. I'm not opposed to proceeding this way, Madam Chair, but if I could just request that you give the address as opposed to just the item number as well, because I'm following on my computer screen. It's a little complicated.
Sure, good idea. All right, so we are left with number 5, which is 90 and 92 Prince Albert, and number 10, 4069 to 471 Catherine. And I believe there was no issue from anybody, so are we all in favor? All right, so for the record, those 2 applications are granted. Now, we're going to go back to our regular schedule on this, and because we have a speaker on number 6, let's go to that one next. So what I need for number 6 is then the agent, who would be, let's give me a moment. Yes, thank you. Ms. Dawu? Yeah, okay. Been jumping around a little bit today, so it's hard to stay with the program. Good afternoon. So, Ms. Dawu, we're not going to ask you for a presentation. I do want to give an opportunity, though, to all the members of the panel before we get to our speakers to ask any questions that they might have on this. All right, I'm not seeing anyone. Ms. Dawu, did you want to make maybe a couple of comments as an introduction?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sure, I'm happy to do that. I do, of course, have a full presentation if you would like to see any additional information or supporting imagery. But just to quickly introduce, this is a project for a partial 3rd-story addition at 253 MacKay Street, which is located in the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District. It's also subject to the heritage overlay provisions under Section 60 of the zoning bylaws. So we are here before the committee today because we have already obtained heritage permit approval from council. The project has previous to that gone through extensive review by the heritage planners. Bill's Heritage Subcommittee recommended it for approval, and council ultimately issued the heritage permit to staff delegation. However, because the site is within Section 60 overlay, the provisions need to be varied to 3 of those overlay provisions. We are not seeking any relief under the standard typical zoning standards of the zoning bylaws. So again, these, just to reiterate, are 3 variances to permit this modest rooftop addition and a small ground level extension to permit a exterior storage space of this building. It has gone through through, very extensive design to ensure it's compatible with the streetscape. It's in line with the heights of the adjacent properties and the adjacent attached unit to the south. And again, the rationale for these variances is it's simply a unique property in a front back semi-detached configuration where section 60 of the bylaw does not contemplate the addition to a unit where it is attached in a front and back configuration with no rear yard. So we are seeking to address those issues through this application, and we do hope that the committee approves the application.
All right, thank you, Ms. Doe. Okay, so there's no questions from the panel members at this point. What I will do then is go to our speakers. I have no one on my speakers list, so my
correct.
apologies if I can get your name again. and-
Absolutely. My name is this on? Yeah. My name is Gail McEachran. Gail is spelled Gail. McEachran is spelled McEachern. So it looks like McEachern.
And you're.
I'm the chairman of the Heritage and Development Committee of the New Edinburgh Community Alliance, which is our community association.
And Ms. McEachran, do we have your municipal address?
I'm sorry?
Your municipal address, do we have it?
A what?
Your address.
Oh,
where you
I'm
live.
sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay, 48 Crichton Street, spelled Crichton, New Edinburgh.
All right, thank you very much. So with that, then, I think the floor is yours. So go ahead, please.
Okay, well, I'm the lone voice in the wilderness, clearly, and have been right from the start. NECA, which is the New Edinburgh Community Alliance, and the committee that represents NECA, basically oppose completely 100% the proposal for this site for the addition. It negates the guidelines and objectives of the New Edinburgh Conservation Plan, which was established in 2001 to preserve the architectural integrity of the New Edinburgh neighborhood, primarily late 19th century and early 20th century buildings. 253 MacKay was constructed in 1913. It's an unusual example of neo-Gothic institutional style architecture and the only one of its kind in the historic district. During the evaluation process leading up to the establishment of the New Edinburgh's HCD, this building was identified as a contributing building, meaning that it contributes to the special character of the HCD because of its architecture and history. The New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation Plan contains two key principles relating to the construction of additions. All additions to contributing buildings shall be subordinate to the original. Number two, the height of any addition to an existing building shall not exceed the height of the existing roof line. For added clarity, section 60 of the city's heritage overlay bylaw requires that the addition be confined to the rear yard and is inset from the side walls of the existing building by 0.06 meters. The purpose of these directives is to ensure that the proposed addition does not impose on the existing building and is discreetly hidden behind it. What we have here is the proposed construction of a large addition plus an extended outdoor deck, which will occupy more than 2/3 of the rooftop and substantially alter the appearance of this unique building. The heritage staff has gone to great lengths to justify why this new structure will not have a detrimental effect on the building itself and the present character of the streetscape and adjacent cultural landscape. The staff report maintains that the proposed addition and roof deck projections are set back from the facade sufficiently so that the structures will not be visible from the street at the grade of the house. That's this if you were standing right in front of it on the sidewalk. The report acknowledges that it could be viewed from different vantage points, but would only slightly be noticeable from the street and will not obscure or detract from the heritage character of the existing building. The critical view, which has been ignored, is one from the sidewalk from the adjacent amenity space in front of 255 MacKay, from which the full length and dark bulk of the rooftop addition will be starkly visible. So why is this non-compliant project being brought to this committee? The staff's principal justification is that because there's no rear yard to build on, then a rooftop addition is the only option, but it isn't the only option. The preferable option is to respect the guidelines laid out in the New Edinburgh Conservation Plan and the city's bylaws and say no. Thank you.
Ms. McEachran, thank you for that presentation. This item has been issued a heritage permit and
I
it was
know.
approved by council. Did you get a chance to speak to council at that time?
Not at council, but I went to the Built Heritage Committee and I presented at the Built Heritage Committee. And I was the only person in the room that actually opposed this, representing our district, our Heritage Conservation District.
Were they able to respond to your?
No,
concern?
and also I've had no really adequate explanation as to why this is justified. It's not as if it's even, sometimes the justification can be that we're trying to meet intensification guidelines of both the city and the province. This is not an intensification. This is one family who just wants to have more space on the top of the house to have more rooms, basically. And it's a very unique building. It's a very unusual building, and to me, it looks as if there's an elephant sitting on top of an armadillo.
All right, so we do see that. We have the renderings from the cross section. So we have some idea of what that looks like. We can see the very heritage portion that you're talking about in the addition in the back. This committee, though, because there has been, heritage review of this, that's really the forum to be concerned about the policies that are directly related to the conservation designation for that area. So, okay, but thank you for your submission. It's good food for thought. Is there anyone? Oh, yes, Member Coakley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for the witness, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your family name, so I won't call you by your first name.
Oh, there, you're up there.
Yeah, I'm on the screen.
Yeah, hi.
Recognizing you're not an architect, I'm not an architect. You've suggested to us that we should just say no. Fair enough. Is it your view, though, or your understanding that something could be put on the roof and comply with the heritage requirements as you outlined them, or is it your understanding that the heritage requirements would prevent anything from it? Like, I guess basically what I'm questioning is this an issue of design not being compliant with the heritage design, the heritage character, or is it nothing could go there without damaging the heritage character?
I think our view is that nothing should be going there. This should remain intact as it was originally.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Member Coakley. Anyone else with questions for Ms. McEachern? No? All right, so we're going to go to, thank you, Ms. McEachern. Anyone else in the audience, either here or online, want to speak to the application here at 253 MacKay? Not seeing anybody else come forward. All right, so with that, then I think committee, we can go to a decision at this point. All those in favor?
With respect, Madam Chair, I'd prefer to reserve.
All right, if you'd like to reserve on this one, then we can do that. So again, just as a reminder, it means that the committee will make a decision on this application. We simply will not have the opportunity to make a decision until after the hearing, so that we can discuss more the evidence that we've heard. I did fail to give you, Ms. Daou, a last few minutes to recap. So if you'd like to do that, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would just like to reiterate that I was at the Built Heritage Committee where this project was brought forward, and there was overwhelming support from the members at that time for the application. So it was seen very favorably by experts in the field. RMA, the architects that are responsible for the design, have put forth a great deal of thought and effort into ensuring that this does respect the existing heritage character of the building. Speaking to the points raised, there would be no viable option to introduce a modest addition to this property without significant impact to the main principal building that does have that heritage character represented. So this does offer the most appropriate and reasonable solution to provide a very modest amount of living space for this family to continue to live and grow in their community that they already are in. And finally, just reiterating the submission materials that were submitted in support of the application demonstrate quite clearly that from the streetscape, this does blend quite nicely into the existing landscape and character of the building. So we do again hope that you see this as meeting the 4 tests under Section 45 of the Planning Act. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dahu, and as you know, you'll get the decision in due time. All right. Okay, so I think that takes us now to number 3, which is 514 Churchill. I'm looking for Mr. and Mrs. Van Zetten. Good afternoon. The committee does not require a presentation from you at this point in time. But I am going to open it up to the members of the panel to ask questions at this point. Does anyone have any questions on the application that we need clarification before we go to our speakers? All right. I am not seeing anybody come forward, so we were hoping to deal with this application very quickly. We do understand that there are speakers now who would like to approach the committee. So, and I don't believe there's anybody on my list. No, and I didn't have anybody on my list to speak. So, can we bring those people in then?
Yes, there is one speaker now, Madam Chair, Dorita Lewis.
Oh, hello, Ms. Lewis.
Good afternoon.
So, Ms. Lewis, can you just for the record, give me your full name and your municipal address, please?
Absolutely. So my full name is Dorita Lewis, and I live at 514 Churchill Avenue North. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself and Jessica Parnell, who also lives at this current address. Jessica is joining us today via the YouTube link.
All right, thank you. With that then, we can give you the floor. You've got 5 minutes.
Excellent. So we just wanted to voice some concerns regarding the subdivision of the lot and the subsequent construction of the building. Our concerns are the reduction of the lot size resulting in loss of access to the green space, which we currently enjoy as part of our lease. We also are concerned about the resulting loss of sunlight in our apartments after the new building is constructed. We are concerned about the resulting disruption from the construction during the day for those of us who work from home, particularly the noise from the construction is a concern. And overall, we're concerned about the inconvenience to those of us living here, including the impact on amenities such as the parking space behind the building during the time of construction. We'd like these just noted for the record.
All right, thank you very much for that. So it really has more to do with the development side of things as opposed to the consent side of things. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct, and the impact it would have on those living here.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Lewis from the panel members? No? All right. I'm sorry, can you repeat the name of the other person that you're representing for this?
It's Jessica Parnell, Parnell.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this application? Do we have anyone else waiting?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Okay, with that, then I think we can go to a decision. Is there anyone who would like to reserve? No. Okay, so I think we can go to a decision. All those in favor of the application? All right. For the record, the application is granted. In fact, for us, this is very much in keeping with what we've seen in other areas and in keeping with the policies, the intensification policies that the city has. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so that takes us to, all right. I think I'd like to go to number 8, which is 998 Colonel By, and I'm looking for Mr. Sewer again. Sorry, Ms. Sewer.
No worries.
Not sure why I didn't notice that. Okay, so on this one, fairly straightforward again. One of the questions that the members had, however, is it has to do with the provisions of the Planning Act under subsection 45(2) with regards to continuous use. Can you confirm to us that in fact you meet that the spirit of that and intent of that provision?
Yeah, for sure. So the lot has continued to have a detached dwelling on it, and it's so that use has continued on the property and continues to this day.
Any questions from our panel members? Yes, Member Coakley.
Can you confirm whether the lot has been used continuously as a residence, that there has actually been a resident there? Or just that the building has been there?
So to that point, so firstly, it's my understanding that the property has been occupied. Regardless of that, that doesn't speak to whether the intent has remained for it to be residential use, and it has been continued to be used as a residential use, not by the owner, but it has continued to be a residential use. I can confirm that. Sorry, Madam Chair, you look like you were going to say something, but I did notice my colleague Murray Chown has his hand up as well, so he might be able to speak to that as well.
Yes, that's what I was noticing as well. Mr. Chown has, I didn't see him earlier, but I do see him now. Mr. Chown, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me and the background noise isn't too bad. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Thank you very much. So with respect to the question, whether or not that building is actually occupied is not relevant to the test of maintaining the legal non-conforming rights for the use. The use is the building that's on the property, and the building that's on the property is a detached dwelling, and it continues to be a detached dwelling. Whether it's occupied or not is not relevant to the question as to whether or not we've maintained our legal non-conforming uses, or that our client has maintained their legal non-conforming uses. It's not about whether people live in the building or not, is whether the structure on the building is intended to be used as a detached dwelling, whether it's occupied or not. So there's no question as to whether or not this building maintains legal non-conforming rights.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. That was actually the subject of a long discussion by the members. So we do have an understanding, but I do see Mr. Member Coakley has some comments. Go ahead.
Yeah, just simply that's for us to determine, not for an applicant to determine. We will determine what the meaning of the legislation is.
With respect,
All right,
sir.
So Mr. Chown, I think your point has been made, and I think we'll leave it at that because the committee does understand the distinction between occupancy versus use, the continuous use versus. So I think we can move on that point if that's okay. All right, so getting back to any further questions before we go to members of the public on this. All right, so let me catch up here for a minute. Do I have anyone? No, I don't have anyone. Is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak either for or against this application? Yes, come on down.
My name is Susan. Sorry, item number 2, which is the same sort of request for permission to continue a non-conforming use. And it's one of the vital arguments that we're going to put forward has to do with what does use mean? And I wouldn't like to see what we are going to suggest is patently clear to be dismissed in consideration of this application. So I'm perplexed as to what the proper procedure here would be, because this is absolutely extraordinarily important to us.
So we're going to hear the evidence that you'll present. Generally speaking, when it's an occupancy issue versus a use issue, The Planning Act really wants to get at, the intent is to get at the continuous use of the property and the demonstration of that. Occupancy can sometimes have a role in that, though. So, you know, one of the questions that we still haven't asked Ms. Sewer, which is a question I would have for her, is whether or not, for example, there had been any other type of use. So it's one thing to say you have a residential use, but was there ever been any other type of use in combination with that residential use that might have changed the nature of it? So there are some things you can ask that can speak to an occupancy issue as well, but generally speaking, it's the use that we're trying to get at. So Ms. Peterson, just for the record though, because you did come forward, we don't have your municipal address. Can we have that now? Or are you on the list for number 2?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right, then perfect. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the application? All right, so with that though, Ms. Sewer, I did have that question in my head about whether or not there had been any other use attached to that residential use over time. So has the nature always been strictly residential, to your knowledge?
Thank you for the question. So to my knowledge, it's been strictly residential on the property. Thanks.
And is that just based on discussions with the current property owner?
Yeah.
All right, so Ms. Linker on this one? I have to always go back to the planning report and see who signed. Ms. Linker, was that something that you looked at as part of your review to ensure that we're talking about a continuous use?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. I did look into seeing if there's anything saying to the contrary of that, and I didn't find any evidence that this was nothing but a single detached dwelling.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, with that then, did I make the last call out? Anybody else to speak to this application? No? Okay, I think I did that. So Ms. Sewer, you've got 2 minutes to recap.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just wanted to reiterate the fact that staff have no concerns with this application. It's a simple permission application for an addition in the side yard. And there's generally been support from neighbors. All the neighboring property owners around this particular property are in support of the application. And so it's our professional planning opinion and staff's professional planning opinion that this application is good planning and meets the test for a permission application. So we would urge you to approve this application. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sewer. Anyone want to reserve on this one, or are we ready to make a decision? Okay, so all those in favor? All right, so for the record, Ms. Sewer, the application is granted. Thank you very much. Okay, so that then takes us, all right, just having a look here. I'd like to do application number 137 Ella, and I'll be looking for Ms. Daou again for that one. Hello again.
Hello again.
All right, so on this one, there is opposition that we've seen. So I think what we would like to do is to get a presentation from you, Ms. Daou, if that be possible.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. You can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So this is an interior lot located on the north side of Ella Street, municipally known as 37 Ella, situated west of Bank Street and Lansdowne Park, east of Bronson and north of the Rideau Canal in the Glebe neighborhood. The proposal is to demolish the existing dwelling and construct a new one-story long semi-detached dwellings with 2 primary dwelling units in a front and back configuration and 2 additional dwelling units in each. The site is zoned R3P and designated neighborhood in the inner urban transect area, and the long semis and additional dwelling units are permitted use. Next slide, please. Again, the long semi will contain one primary unit in the front with 2 additional dwelling units and 1 primary unit in the rear with 2 additional dwelling units. There is no parking that is required or provided for this development. It's intended to be retained for now under one ownership. If it was to be severed in the future, that would require a separate application to the Committee of Adjustment. Again, the intention, however, is to retain this under single ownership. And to facilitate the development, variances are required to permit a reduced lot area of 271 square meters, which is a deficiency of 28.5 square meters. A reduced rear yard setback of 5.6 meters, whereas 7.72 is required, and a reduced lot area of 22% of the lot area, whereas 25% of the lot area is required. The proposed development does exceed zoning requirements for lot width and exceeds the westerly side yard setbacks, which requires 1.2 meters and 2.1 meters is being provided. I will note that this is updated per the initial plan that was circulated to committee. It was recirculated to committee last Wednesday, and I am hopeful you have had appropriate opportunity to review. But just highlighting that the only changes to the plans were to shift the building further to the west to meet that 0.6 meter side yard setback along the west lot line and increase the side yard setback along the east to the 2.1. We've also shifted the accessory building slightly over to the east to keep it in line with the existing footprint of the existing accessory structure. Speaking to the accessory building, it's provided to in the rear to provide fully enclosed waste storage for the units. And there will be a small tree and soft landscaping otherwise on the property. The site functions well in this configuration and really isn't a significant departure from the footprint that is already on site. Especially when considering the existing building has a non-compliant front yard setback and a non-compliant interior side yard setback situated at 0.0 meters at the north west corner of the lot. The rear yard setback reduction is in part in response to the angled lot lines, which do result in required step backs at the front facade. And the requested relief is again at the most restrictive point, which is at the west corner, and it gradually increases in depth towards the east corner. And these setbacks are very similar to the adjacent properties to the east and west, as shown in the black hatched lines. This is just an extension of the survey building footprints, just extended towards the side lot lines to show and demonstrate where the extent of those adjacent building rear walls are. Next slide, please. This building has been sensitively designed to resemble a single detached dwelling from the streetscape with front porch and ample windows to help animate the street. The front back unit configuration for the long semis allows for the provision of additional housing choice in a ground-oriented built form, but without appearing like multi-unit housing. The building is also fully zoning compliant in terms of height. Next slide, please. Quickly, the elevations showing window placements, noting in particular that the west side elevation is the only window that is situated within the requested relief area. But again, noting that this is just on the first story and restricted to that to ensure that there's no privacy and overlook concerns within the requested relief area in the rear yard. Next slide, please. Speaking again, just to the overall character of the neighborhood, and I apologize because the colors on this mapping is not so good, which doesn't help to prove what I'm trying to demonstrate. But if you will note on the right side of the plan, this was also included in the submission package in the cover letter. The solid lines demonstrate approximate measurements based on Geo-Ottawa mapping of rear yards that have a 5.6 meter or less rear yard setback, and the hatched lines would be those that are between 5.6 meters and 7.7 meters. 7.7 meters being, generally speaking, if the required rear yard setback were to be applied to all of these lots. But this just truly 5 minutes, of course. This does demonstrate that the proposed reductions are in keeping with the lot fabric and the urban fabric of this community. I do, of course, speak to the 4 tests, but I am over time. So if you'd like me to continue, I'm happy to. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right, I think maybe we will go directly to questions on this. Just before I go to the panel members, you are aware that there's been a number of letters of opposition?
Yes, I am
And, okay, can you tell me a little bit about your consultation?
Yes, so the owners, we had prepared a letter speaking to the application, and the owners had dropped that letter off to the immediately surrounding properties. So anything with lot lines touching the property and across the street. So I think there was 5 or 6 in total, where my client, the owner of the property, has hand delivered them into their mailboxes. We received one response back to that letter, and it was simply in regards to some of the cleanup that was being done on site, and that was addressed by the owners. Otherwise, we had circulated the information to the Glebe Community Association, but received no response.
All right, thank you very much for that then. Questions from other members of the panel? Any questions at all? Yes, Member Blatherwick.
I have a question for Ms. Linker. Ms. Linker, in reviewing the department's response, I note that infrastructure engineering has said that there'll be a complete review of grading and servicing done by staff during the building permit process, that the surface stormwater runoff, including roof water, will be self-contained on the site, that existing grading and drainage patterns must not be altered. These are all good things. What I'm wondering though is why there's no request, and I'll read directly from one of your staff reports: at the time of building permit application, a grading and servicing plan prepared by a professional engineer, Ontario land surveyor, or a certified engineering technologist will be required. Why is that not being requested by the department as a condition?
I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Blatherwick. Can you please repeat the question?
I just want to know why you're not requiring the applicant to undertake a servicing study for the site.
To clarify, do you mean the servicing capacity study?
Yep.
Thank you for the question. If asset management decides at building permit stages that a servicing capacity study should be undertaken, they will notify that at the building permit stage. It was loosely reviewed for that type of requirement during the Committee of Adjustment stage, and it wasn't flagged as red for these purposes. If it is down the road determined that there's not enough capacity for these sewer levels with the current design or with the updated design that's coming in a few years, then perhaps the development would have to be altered in the future.
Yeah, because as I said to my fellow panel members, I'm familiar with houses on that street, having several friends who live there. And they've had sewer problems on that street for a long time, which is why the city is finally updating the sewer, although the sewer is going to be a combined sewer. It won't be grade separated. So quite frankly, I would have preferred it if the department had requested this servicing study up front and not in your report, as you've done for an application that's before us today in Rockcliffe Park. A semi-detached building replacing a semi-detached building, and you required a servicing study to be done. That's just my comment, Ms. Linker. Thanks very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Member Blatherwick. All right, so Ms. O'Connell, I was going to give you an opportunity, but you've disappeared. So we'll move on then. Okay, any other questions from the panel?
No.
Okay, I have just one. Ms. Dow, I mean, the report talks about, and I just want to make sure I understand where we are. So from forestry, they talk about a waste shed that should be shifted to the east of the property, and permission that's required for owners. Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the Forestry Department did request that the accessory building be shifted to the east to basically be in line with the existing accessory building, because it was a recommendation or comment from the arborist that we had retained that because of the location of the accessory building, there's unlikely to be impacts to the tree to the north because the roots are already impacted by the existing accessory building. So we did shift that accessory building over, but it is otherwise largely within the built footprint of the existing accessory building. Our arborist does not see any concerns with potential impacts to that tree, and had indicated that standard procedure for fencing be installed if possible, and there's already an existing fence there as well that would help. I did reach out to the forester commenting on the file because I was unsure about the implications of the request to have a tree, I forget the exact reference, but the mitigation sign off from the adjacent properties to the east and north regarding those adjacent trees. It's not an request that I've seen in the past because there are no intentions to remove that tree and there are no intentions to impact those trees and their root systems negatively, and all mitigation measures will be followed. I didn't receive a comment back from staff, so that is something we do have concern with, just because it's obtaining permission for potential damages, I think would raise flags that don't necessarily need to be raised, and our arborist again has no concerns. And then the final comment was to consider permeable walkway along the side yard, which we are implementing, and to install a new tree in the front yard, which we are also implementing.
All right, if we can just get forestry up just to get a comment on this. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, and thank you. I'd like to firstly thank Madame Deu for the shifting of the waste shed. I do appreciate that. Regarding the request for permission from the adjacent owners, that was based on a misinterpretation of one of the sections of the tree protection bylaw under Part 5. So there is no requirement for a permit to injure. However, it would be good practice to at least notify the neighboring owners of the adjacent trees, just that there will be an injury, and sharing the TIR would go a long way, I think, to alleviate any potential concern. So that would be my only request. We don't need any sort of confirmation of that, but just an advisory note.
So just a question on that, then. You used the word injury, so there's no concern from Forestry Services on that, on the injury that may be imposed?
So injury here refers to any work within the critical root zone. So the extent of work proposed within the critical root zone is well within the tolerance of the tree species and the amount of encroachment. So I have no concerns with the level of injury, but it is an injury. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that explanation. I was not aware that there's nuances around the word injury in this case. Okay, excellent. Anybody else before I go to our speakers list? We've got a number of people on this. Actually, no, with this one we've got one person registered. Ms. Lewis. Do we have Ms. Lewis?
Madam Chair, Camille Lewis is being promoted to panelist as we speak.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Oh, you're on mute. We still don't hear you, though.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm not sure, is the coordinator able to bring up the presentation? Thank you very much. So starting on page 1, please. Slide 1. My name is Camille Lewis. I'm in a neighboring property on the southwest end of Ella Street at the corner of Gordon. I have lived on the corner for 23 years and have observed the incremental development up close and personal that has already happened on Ella Street. As my garage, or my semi-detached half of the garage, is on Ella Street, and my rear yard gate's exit is to the sidewalk of Ella. Therefore, I spend a considerable amount of time on Ella Street. I'd like to mention for the committee's benefit that regarding consultation, I do note that the circulation, I'm not sure how much flexibility or discretion is permitted in the center pinpoint that helps to establish the 60-meter radius. However, it was rather justified so that more of Fifth Avenue would be captured. So I know for myself, I didn't receive a circulation and did see the sign. But I think that it may not have garnered as much detailed information on the circulation as was possible. So that's just a FYI. And also that the sign that was at the front of the property only referred to an application submitted for semi-detached. And it may say long semi-detached, but the nuance is lost on the average person. Whereas I noticed, for instance, a property on other applications, on the sign that was on the property, it actually referred to the additional units that were also being envisioned for the property. So that's kind of a communication difference that I think is very important. And lastly, on the consultation element, just last week, June 26, 2024, Ella Street engaged in the public consultation for the full reconstruction of the street in spring 2025. So therefore, much of Ella Street's kind of individual or personal residential bandwidth has been consumed by reviewing those detailed plans and preparing for submissions to that, et cetera. However, in spite of that, I do now understand that 5 letters of objection have been received on the current application before committee, to which I will add. Next slide, please. The Ella Street contributes to the official plan already. There's actually a variety of housing that's much more diverse than the single detached homes immediately surrounding the subject property. I'd like to point out that also from this photograph, that the size of Fifth Avenue on the right-hand side really helps to delineate the narrow width of Ella, which is kind of goes through the middle of this aerial photograph. And that is very important to the specific context, or the context of this specific property. And actually, just on the notification sign at the front of a property, it was 10 Chippewa, which was heard, I think, yesterday, that did include the additional units. So the point here on this slide is that not all locations within R3P are the same, and therefore not all equal candidates for development of this scope. Next slide, please. And if you could zoom in if possible. Oh, I guess you are. In terms of the variety of housing, it includes several semis, duplexes, and multi-residential units. If we start from the west end of Ella Street, up at the top, we won't be able to see it directly. So my house, you can see there is a semi-detached flat roof property that's on the corner of Gordon and Ella. That's the 1719 Gordon Street. There is a triplex between 14 and 36 Gordon Street. I don't know the number. It's not on Geo Ottawa, but there is one building between those 14 and 36, and 14 looks directly down Ella Street. So this triplex is right next door. It has parking at the rear and engagement space at the front. The semi-detached are also at 57 and 55 Ella, 60A and 60B Ella, 48 and 46 Ella, and 1 and 3 Ella. There are multi-units and rentals at 45 Ella, 13 Ella, and 5 Ella. And I haven't. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Lewis. So your 5 minutes are up, but I'd like to give you another 2 minutes, because I think, you know, what would be important for the committee to hear is what you feel the impacts will be.
Okay. So the impact, and if we could go to the slide 4, because it is a narrow street with numerous driveways and limited on-street parking, one of the impacts of not providing parking, and I recognize that is part of approved development in this zone at this time, But however, because of the context of Ella, it is going to put a real extra strain and more pinch points on a street that's already quite limited. We do serve as some overflow for Lansdowne events. And everyone who lives here now, you know, has chosen to live in like more cramped quarters, I guess, if you will. But adding to 5 residences to a single residence, so for the combination of really 6, total of 6 residences, is very significant. I saw a city study that said 93% of glebe homes have either 0 or 1 car. This was part of whenever parking was removed from a requirement. So if we said that there's a full chance that the proposal, 50% of them will actually have a car and 50% won't. Let's, you know, the 0 and 1. That there's still three residents that will require ongoing parking, and there is no permitted parking on Ella. Like for instance, when the snow removal has to happen, there's no exceptions. You get your car off the road. Garbage collection, you can see on the right-hand side, this is just early one morning last winter. It's a very tight street. And the garbage trucks and recycling trucks regularly can barely make the turns down Gordon Street.
So it's the last point.
Okay, so my last point to make. Yes, thank you very much. My last point would be that if you would, committee members, as you're going through the materials, the coordinator has the balance of the presentation. So there would be slides 5, 6, and 7. If you would read them yourself, I would greatly appreciate that because the variances are actually addressed and the materiality of those variances, which are so for the rear setback, the rear yard area, and the lot size difference, they're much more significant than I think than communicated in the application. And the tree we have history on the street from 60A, 60B that protections do not protect the tree. The one that it dies, it basically cannot, the reality of excavation is that it is fatal in cramped quarters, and the ground left behind is hostile to greening. It's compacted, it's not arable. So I would ask you to consider all those points in your decision. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lewis, especially for taking the time to put a presentation together for our consideration, and we certainly will be taking that into account as we make a decision.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Lewis? All right. I don't have anybody else on my list, but I'm going to make a call out. Is there anyone in the audience here or online who would like to speak to the committee about this application? Okay.
Madam Chair, there is a potential speaker who has raised their hand.
Okay.
Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Chair.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
There I am. Okay. Hi. So I'm one of those people who didn't have a chance to, start out with, I'm Sally Juden. I live at 14 Gordon Street. I look right down Ella Street. I'm looking down Ella right now. I'm one of those people that became aware of this project just recently and really didn't have time to do any research and understand everything going on. In addition, the plans wouldn't load properly from the email. So I will try to keep it quick though. First of all, my first question is, is this covered by the mature neighborhood overlay? And if it is, then I would ask why there was no streetscape analysis done. And I would comment that it is very much not in keeping with the streetscape.
All right, quick question, Ms. Linker. Is this part of the mature neighborhood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 37 Ella Street is within the mature neighborhoods overlay. However, a streetscape character analysis was not required as the proposed development does not propose any new driveways or garages, and the front entrance faces the subject street.
All right, so just to recap, Ms. Juden, really the streetscape analysis really only looks at very narrowly two aspects. It doesn't look at design or any of that. It's really very narrow in its application. So I think what we've heard is that what's being proposed here, it does not trigger the need to do that analysis.
Okay, and I would also say, so if it, so when I've seen it applied, I have seen it applied by feature characteristics. For example, the front porch. The porch that's on this picture is really more of a step in, not so much of a porch, similar to the rest of the porches on the street. But okay, and also that the magnitude of the building, maybe it's, I know it's because it's such a giant building that taking it even to the acceptable setbacks still creates a much more massive effect than all of the other buildings on that street. So the other buildings are so much shorter than this one, so much smaller in general, that even if they were to the right up to the setback, it wouldn't have the same effect that this building does. And also in with the driveways. So this is not being required to have a driveway, but a driveway is a feature of most of the buildings on that street. Anyway.
Have you any other comments?
Yeah, sorry, I just ask that you apply the requirements that the city has in place.
So just to be clear though, so you've talked about massing and you talk about height. Neither of those have been flagged as part of the application because they meet the zoning bylaw requirements.
I understand, but those two things have an effect on what happens when you reduce the setbacks, and the request is to reduce the setbacks.
Yeah, the committee can only deal with what's before it.
Yeah, I'm just saying
is those very minor, those three minor variances. So,
right. Those small setbacks have a big impact because of the building itself. That's it. And 6 units.
Yeah.
Any further comments, Ms. Juden? All right, so panel members, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Juden? All right. Ms. Juden, just out of curiosity, how many years have you been, you may have said this and I didn't catch it.
I didn't, but I grew up on Craig Street, which is the street at the other end of Ella. I can look down Ella and see the house I grew up in, and I've lived here for 20 years, and I've lived 2 doors down for an additional 10 years. I've lived here all my life. And the number of intensification projects is really affecting everybody's ability to get along, because it makes it more and more difficult when you get tighter and tighter and tighter, which is what's happening.
All right, thank you, Ms. Juden.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak to this application? Either, well, I don't think anybody in the audience, but anybody online?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, I think, Ms. Dowie, we're going to give you a couple of minutes to recap. I think it's a safe guess that we're going to reserve. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so Ms. Dowie, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Thank you to the additional speakers for their comments. We have reviewed them in detail, and just to offer a couple of responses to some of those comments made and just pulling back to the official plan policies and zoning policies and overall direction of city intensification policies. I think it's important to highlight here that the provision of new housing typologies and more affordable units is really necessary across the city. And this is one of those neighborhoods where rental options may not necessarily be as abundant. So it's definitely a situation where the site can accommodate this type and form of intensification. And this form of densification is what is encouraged and will be encouraged as we move forward with our new zoning bylaw and under the policies of the official plan. The additional dwelling units are permitted and appropriate for this site. Just speaking briefly as well to parking, the provision of parking on this site would not offer a better or improved development solution. The situation on site right now allows for soft landscaping. It allows for appropriate waste management so that there are no concerns that are generated from that with the additional units. And provision of parking would ultimately detract from those components and offer less opportunity for soft landscaping, less opportunity for trees, driveways, which are discouraged by the typically actually by the mature neighborhoods bylaw provisions as well. So this offers a solution to providing a modest amount of housing units in an area where it is much needed, in a form that is sympathetic to the neighborhood and really from the streetscape will resemble more similarly to a single detached dwelling. Just to sort of sum up the 4 tests, this lot can appropriately manage and accommodate the development and density on site despite the reduced size. The rear yard setbacks are generally in line with the adjacent building rear walls as well, and there's appropriate soft landscaping provided. The intention of the official plan is to support infill intensification through developments such as this, and through a variety of housing types and built form, which it does include ground-oriented dwelling units, missing middle housing, and additional dwelling units. The intent and purpose of the zoning is still met because the development can be managed appropriately on site. The rear yard setback and rear yard area are again at the most restrictive points. So the remainder of the building does move closer towards compliance as we go towards the east. And it does improve some site conditions which offer non-complying building setbacks and conditions currently. Finally, infill intensification on service lots in the urban area positively contributes to the provision of much needed additional housing supply. Again, as we've mentioned, city infrastructure engineers have been consulted. There have been no red flags concerning servicing, stormwater management, and capacity on site. And this development is overall sympathetic to the neighborhood context with the overall building design and looking more similarly to a single family home. We feel that the proposal does meet the 4 tests of a minor variance under section 45(1) of the Planning Act, represents good land use planning, and we do recommend it for approval.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Doe. As you heard, we're reserving. You will get the decision, as you know.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. That brings us to, I think I'd like to hear application number 4, 48 McNaughton, looking for Mr. Falsetto.
Madam Chair, could we just take a short health break?
Yes, we can. What time is it now? It's 2:17. Can we come back at 2:25? All right, we'll see everybody back at 2:25.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right, I think we're back. It's now 2:25. I have all the members back. That's always good. So back to Mr. Falsetto, who I believe is online.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. I don't see you, Mr. Falsetto.
Oh, sorry about that. There we are. Okay. Thank you.
That's fine. So Mr. Falsetto, the committee would actually like to hear a presentation from you on this application. As you're, I'm sure, aware, we've got a number of concerns that have been raised. So if you could just to give us a brief presentation and address some of the concerns that have been submitted, please.
Yes, thank you. The proposed dwelling is going to be, it was removing one single family home and it will be replaced with one single family home.
Oh, just a minute, Mr. Falsetto. Do you have a PowerPoint presentation for us?
No, unfortunately, I don't.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I apologize. I'm actually out of the country right now, and there was some technical issues with me forwarding the information. My apologies. The drawings were submitted to the building department, and we complied with everything except the streetscape character analysis, which precludes front-facing garage. Some of the comments and concerns from the people who have written to the committee address other points, but unfortunately for that, we're in compliance, all our setbacks except the front yard, front-facing attached garage. And I'm not sure if there was a further correspondence by the community association, because I addressed their concern yesterday, and they had indicated they would withdraw their objection provided the front wall of this house was behind the adjacent property. And I proved it to him that the other property is 4.2 meters and we are 4.22, not significant, but nonetheless not in front of it, which is what their concern was. Another issue was that we would be creating hard surfaces that would not allow for us to contain the water on our own property. But in fact, a detached garage at the rear yard would reduce the amount of permeable surfaces in the rear yard with a continuous laneway from the city sidewalk all the way to the rear of the property. So I had addressed that with some of the concerns as well. The committee has approved in the recent past other forward-facing attached garages, Mason Terrace being an example, I provided that with our submission some time ago. And in fact, one of the discussions with the community association was that on Main Street between Clegg and traveling south just to Mason Terrace, there actually even just to Bauer, to be honest, there are almost 10 or 12 homes from the 1920s and 30s that have attached front-facing garages. And then there's the infill at 320 or 310 to 300. I don't remember the exact address, my apologies. The attached townhouses that were built in the last 20 years. So it's not an uncommon request, and it's not asking for any other relief other than for the front-facing attached garage. So I'd like to apologize again for not being able to forward the PowerPoint presentation, but effectively that's the verbal version of it.
So, Mr. Falsetto, it's very unfortunate that you didn't provide us with any kind of visual evidence, because in something like this, it would have been extremely helpful to have a look at what that streetscape actually, because you're asking us to make a decision on something that's specifically to do with the streetscape and the sort of the visual impact. We have staff's report with some concerns about it. So to me, the best thing would have been to provide us with that photographs or, you know, any of that, maybe using, in any event,
excuse me, I'm sorry.
I just find it really, I find it a little bit difficult because we do look for planning evidence when people come before us, especially when there's opposition. And it would include, you know, somebody who's in the business to, in fact, talk to us about the 4 tests and how that's being met. So, okay. So that said, though, we've heard from you. We do have it on record. So Member Coakley, go ahead, please.
Well, just to follow up on your comments, Madam Chair, on the streetscape analysis, can somebody, whether, you know, the applicant or Ms. Linker perhaps, or whoever's representing planning on this issue, tell us exactly what the streetscape analysis was, like exactly how many of the relevant houses on the street do have front-facing garages? One of the opponents has some information in that regard in their submission, but I would like to either hear it from the applicant or, as I say, from the city, what the actual streetscape analysis reveals.
All right, thank you, Member Coakley. My apologies. So we do have a new planner with us, Ms. King, and I believe she'll be able to answer your questions. But I'd like just to take a minute to welcome Ms. King to panel 1. It's first time I've seen Ms. King, so hopefully we'll see more of you in the future. With that, we're looking for your thoughts on that streetscape on McNaughton.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I really do appreciate it. And it's nice to see panel 1. I'm typically on panel 3, so it is great to see everyone. I'm just pulling up, I might need Ms. Linker's help because she did perform the street character analysis on this file. Just give me one moment.
I've just got to be honest here. This is my neighborhood, by the way. So I am very familiar with McNaughton and Bauer and Maine and Clegg. So,
may I add, and I apologize because this is completely my fault, but I did submit photos in the application process for the committee, and I apologize because I assumed that they would have been forwarded to the panel for review. Again, it's completely my fault, and unfortunately, being out of the country, I've had some technical issues that I have not been able to resolve, hence not being able to send you the PowerPoint presentation. But I just wanted to put that out there as a further apology for my incompetence.
That's fine, Mr. Falsetto. It's just maybe, you know, we can always adjourn. I mean, that's always an option as well, right? So if you're not in the country, then there are ways that we can accommodate you at another hearing. So in any event, we're just waiting to hear from Ms. King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have the exact analysis that staff completed. The dominant character of the street was no front-facing attached garage, meaning That's the majority of the houses of the 21 lots analyzed. From a quick look at Google Street View, which might be inaccurate due to the date of Google Street View, shows, I believe, only one house of the 21 had a front-facing attached garage. But again, I don't have the applicant's photos in front of me to redo the analysis. But it was an overwhelming result.
All right, thank you. And that result doesn't surprise me. Member Coakley.
Yeah, so just perhaps a follow-up. I believe we did receive a number of photographs. Whether we received all of the ones you submitted, of course, we don't know. But in, on my look at those photographs, none of them actually addressed the issue of this street. There may be front-facing garages in other streets in the area, but I didn't see any that addressed the issue of this particular streetscape character. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. If somebody has some information that they can provide that fills in that gap, I would welcome it.
We may very well get that when we go to the members of the public. So, all right. How about we see what can be found? I do appreciate your comments, Member Coakley, about the photographs not necessarily representing the streetscape that we're concerned about. Okay. If there's no other questions for Mr. Falsetto, then I think what I'll do, is there anyone here that, yes, I do have a resident who is on my list. That would be a Mr. Segal. Do we have Mr. Segal? And we also have a Ms. Young. So do we have either one of those speakers available?
Madam Chair, like you mentioned, we have two registered speakers, Robin Segal and Gail Young. Currently, it only appears that Gail Young is in the webinar, so she's going to be promoted to speak first if that is that works.
Yes, that's great. If we can bring her forward, please. Good afternoon. So Ms. Young, we can see you, but you're still on mute. Ms. Young, I'm wondering whether we've lost Ms. Young. All right, you're still on mute. The other option would be to call in, I believe. All right, do we have Mr. Segal at all at this point?
No, Madam Chair, that speaker doesn't appear to be online. We can, excuse me, post the phone number to call into on the screen.
Okay, can we actually provide that to Ms. Young directly in the chat, just to her?
I believe we could do that.
Yeah, that would be great. What I'll do in the interim is to do a general call out. Is there anyone in the audience here? Yes, or online, anybody further online? Come on down that wants to speak to this application. That's at 48 McNaughton. So Mr. Gray, I don't think we need your name or your address again, just welcome again on this application. So the floor is yours.
So the front-facing garage is a big issue. And I'm from Westboro and we get a lot of them. And I always look online to see which applications across the city are front-facing garages because I'm trying to, work through it myself. It is a complicated issue. And so that's why I always kind of look at them. I don't always comment. I rarely comment, and I kind of feel bad about commenting on this one because I kind of feel I'm stepping on the toes of, the community association. But in this case, the application was so thin, the cover letter, it addresses absolutely zero of the concerns of that I would think, the residents of the area would want to hear about. So the other thing that I really had a kind of a concern about is I tried to get that streetscape analysis form. I contacted the coordinator and Miss Linker. Miss Linker helped me by just, telling me not the numbers, but which was the dominant characters. And that's really all I could get, which is kind of surprising because that's a fundamental. I mean, that's the basis of where everything starts from. Those numbers, is it 17 to 3 or 4 or whatever? That's where you got to start, and it kind of goes from there. So that's why my son lives near there, and I was visiting him, and I thought, what the heck, I'll just drive over and have a look at the street and see what the street looks like, the character of the street. So that's when I started to see, the real numbers. And I don't know if my numbers are 100% correct, but I think it came out to 17 to 3 or something, like as Miss Linker says. It's really dominant. So when I looked at the streetscape, the other thing that I saw was there were a couple of newer homes that didn't have attached garages. They had worked through this process. They built new homes, but they didn't feel the need to build a attached garage or a carport, front facing. Some of them were in, the backyard, newer homes. So they have come up with designs to work into the streetscape. So and there's tends to be this feeling that you have to have a garage. You have to have a garage that's right at the front or whatever. It's not that simple. And when I was visiting the street, I could see on the street examples of where they had done new construction. It could be that there was a big renovation, but clearly, judging by the rest of the homes on the street, that they had handled that situation. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, in this case, and me, I've spoken for front-facing garages in Westboro and against them. I look at them as a big package. And is there a benefit to the community from having a front-face garage? Like if it's a semi-detached, well, we're adding a density, and that's I do give that some credit. I mean, that's the fact. It's a balancing act. But in this case, it's a single family going to a single family. So, and to be honest, if that home already had a garage, I would say, hey, yeah, you can have a garage, but it doesn't. And if it had a garage, it wouldn't be adding a garage to the streetscape. And I think there's been applications just recently where that's been the case. The city planner said, hey, the numbers really don't mean much. You've got a garage. It's not changing the streetscape character. So you can have a garage no matter what the numbers are. So, and one last thing, this whole thing where, and I call it cherry picking, and it really kind of galls me that, there's a street, 21 lots. Now it's one block over. We find a place. We find a place that agrees with us 2 blocks over. We're cherry picking these.
We're aware, we're aware.
Yeah, I know you're aware, but what gets me is that they never talk about they always talk about the 2 they find. They don't talk about the 20 or 25 that are not. So I think it's really unfair, and that's kind of why, I came to speak today, to get that across and for me to kind of learn something about the whole situation as well.
Well, thank you,
Sorry.
Mr. Gray. Now, we do appreciate your comments, and I can tell you, the committee is, it's not lost on us.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I think that was Member Coakley's point, to be honest, about the photographs. So,
Yeah, it's not easy.
okay. Excellent. Thank you. In that case, I think we're going to go to Ms. Young. Sorry about that, Ms. Young. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I apologize for earlier. My privacy settings wouldn't turn on my microphone. To add some clarification, there are 3 infill houses on the street now with a front-facing garage. And there is one newer house on the street that has retained the original garage in the back and simply added a 2nd story. And the house at 48 McNaughton does have a garage at the back of the property. So that would just clarify sort of some of the statements people have made and what's been going on in the street. And actually, I've spoken to others on the street, and they've asked me to convey that we do not object to a front-facing garage. It makes really the best use of the property. The way it is now with those of us with garages at the back of the property, we lose about 25% of our property to driveway and garage, which is not very helpful. And I guess I should say I live at 32 McNaughton with a detached garage in the rear. Our concern, and we have, there have been several emails back and forth to Mr. Falsetto, is our main concern is there is something that extends beyond the setback of all the other houses in the street. Mr. Falsetto has assured us that the house will have the same setback, but has not elaborated on what is that part of the drawing that extends beyond the front of the house.
So, Ms. Young, that's not part of our application, obviously, right now. He's made some assurances. The drawings are looked at by planning staff. If it was a concern, it would be added, it would be noted as an added minor variance that would be required, and it would be brought forward. And even if it was missed, by the time you get to a plans examiner with the building code department, what happens is they catch these things and they would be sending it back. So I don't think we need to get any further. I can ask the planning staff, but I'm relatively assured that if that was missing, we would have it before us.
Well, we would like an explanation as to what is jutting out beyond the setback of all the other houses of the street. And all we've had inconsistent and evasive replies from Mr. Falsetto.
So is it Ms. Linker who's on this file? Yeah, Ms. King, can you just, we don't have a presentation by the speaker. I'm sure there must be a site plan somewhere that we can bring up, but perhaps you have some idea of what this projection would be. Can you enlighten us at all?
Hi, sorry for the delay. So I don't have the exact floor plans of what's within the building itself. The only thing I can really confirm from my side is that the minimum the minimum front yard setback for this zone is a minimum of 3 meters. So they're still complying with the subzone beneath this. So I don't have any concerns. I would have to defer to the applicant if he chooses to clarify what is in that little projection. But like I said, I don't know what's inside the exact building, so I can't really confirm what residential space that is.
All right, so Mr. Falsetto, over to you.
We're looking at the front steps, the front porch, and to the west side on the left when you're facing the street, that's a flower planter.
Can we zoom in on that by any chance so that we can see that a little better, please?
Yes, it says planter box there, and proposed steps down towards the front, towards the street, but those are allowed to be projected into the front yard. It's the front porch and steps leading down.
All right, so Ms. Young, is that what you were concerned about?
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, because you see, there is something that extends beyond the existing dwelling, and it was unclear exactly what it was.
All right, any other comments, Ms. Young?
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions from our panel members to Ms. Young? No. All right. So I'm going to simply make another call out to be sure anybody else, either in the audience or at home, who would like to speak to this application. All right, I'm going to guess, members, that you would like to reserve. Yes, okay. So with that, Mr. Falsetto, any last words?
No, I thank you for your time. And again, I apologize for my technical inability to get you the presentation.
All right, with that, then you will get the written decision within the 10 days, and but we will make a decision today. All right, thank you
very much.
All right, that brings us to, I believe, the last application on our agenda here for today, and that would be application number 2, 1112 Lisgar and Maple, looking for Ms. Sewer, I believe. So good afternoon again. We are going to request a full presentation from you on this.
So I have some slides if they could be shared. Thanks. So good afternoon, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Simran Soor. I'll be presenting the permission application for 1112 Lisgar and 1 Maple Lane. I'm joined by my colleague Murray Chown, who's joining us virtually, as well as Todd Duckworth, who is the project architect. Next slide, please. So the subject site is located in Rockcliffe Park, and you can see the property on the image in front of you. Next slide, please. So the subject site consists of 2 corner lots that are located at the northeast corner of Lisgar Road and Maple Lane, and the northwest corner of Minto Place and Maple Lane. So the subject site has 42.82 meters of frontage along Lisgar, 35.68 meters of frontage along Maple Lane, 28.32 meters of frontage along Minto Place, and a total lot area of approximately 1,448 square meters. And the subject site is currently occupied by a legally non-conforming 3-story semi-detached dwelling. Next slide, please. So the permission application is required to facilitate the demolition and reconstruction of a legally non-conforming semi-detached dwelling. The proposed semi-detached dwelling will maintain the 3-story built form of the existing building, and a heritage permit for the proposed demolition and construction was recommended by heritage staff and has been approved by City Council on December 6, 2023. Next slide, please. So the slide in front of you highlights the requested permission. So permission is required to expand the reconstruction of an existing legally non-conforming semi-detached dwelling. And as you know, the Planning Act does not provide tests for a permission application, and those tests come from case law. And those tests are that the expansion must be desirable for the appropriate development of the land, and that they must be weighed in light of potential impacts to neighboring properties. Next slide, please. So the first test is that it must be desirable for the use of the land. So the proposed expansion is desirable. The existing semi-detached dwelling has been neglected and is in a state of disrepair. And so as part of the heritage permit process, it was confirmed that the existing building is uninhabitable and it was recommended for demolition. And so the demolition and reconstruction of a new semi-detached dwelling will allow for a more effective use of the site. In addition, the proposed expansion will provide for more living space for the property owner and their family, but it'll still maintain the park-like qualities of the Rockcliffe Park neighborhood. So there's generous front and corner side yard setbacks that are being maintained, There's plenty of room for tree planting. And it's also been designed to retain some of the architectural features of the existing building and is sympathetic to the heritage character. So that was again determined during the heritage permit process. The heritage permit, as I mentioned, was approved by City Council. And as part of this process, the property owner and the architects worked extensively with heritage staff to ensure that the proposal was in line with the policies and guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District Plan and that it's appropriate and desirable for the neighborhood. And so the expansion is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land. Next slide, please. So the second test is that there is the impact on neighboring properties. So the reduced setbacks will have a minimal impact. So from the street, just the way that the lot is, where it's located on the street, the proposed rear yard setback actually reads from the street as more of a side yard setback. And so the proposed 1.5 meter setback is in character with some of the existing side yard setbacks on that street, including the property directly to the north. So you can see on the slide in front of you that the property directly to the north has a side yard setback of 1 meter, which is actually less than what is being proposed on this site. Next slide, please. The reduced corner side yard setback and the rear yard setback also will have a minimal impact on that property. So despite the reduced corner side yard setback, the proposed building doesn't extend beyond the front wall of the neighboring property to the north, which ensures minimal overlook and privacy impacts. And you can also sort of see in the image in front of you that the reduced rear yard setback is also east of the existing building. So that frontage is actually behind the building directly to the north, which will also minimize impact from the reduced setback. Next slide, please. For 1 Maple Lane, so the property on the other side, the proposed corner side yard setback, just the way that it's measured from the front wall of the garage. But most of the semi-detached dwelling is actually set back more than 10 meters, which provides, adequate space for soft landscaping and for tree planting. And again, sort of maintains that park-like character that's in the neighborhood. In addition, the lot that's to the north is also currently vacant, so there's nothing developed there, and therefore there won't be any impact from that reduced setback. Next slide, please. The increase in lot coverage will also have a minimal impact. So despite the fact that it's increasing, the proposal, as I've mentioned a few times, still maintains that park-like setting with lots of space for tree planting, for soft landscaping, as was confirmed by heritage planning staff during the heritage permit process. So the image in front of you shows a number of lots in the surrounding area that have a lot coverage greater than 25%. So most of these range from about 25 to 29%, but if I'd just be permitted a few more minutes.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Speak more clearly. I'm having trouble following some of your points.
Okay,
You
sure.
speed up so much that we lose what you said.
Okay, understood. Thank you. So you can see in the image that there's a number of lots that have a lot coverage that's greater than 25%. And so what you can see in the figure is that there's a number of them that range between about 25 and 29% lot coverage. And there's actually a couple lots that exceed 33% lot coverage. So there's a couple with 36, 37%. So the proposal has a lot coverage of about 27%. So that is consistent with other lots in the neighborhood. It's not out of line with what we're seeing already in the neighborhood. So the expansion of the legally not complying use won't have an impact on neighboring properties. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed development is appropriate and desirable for the use of land and the surrounding area. And this was confirmed with the heritage permit process, which has been approved by City Council. And the expansion will also have a minimal impact on surrounding properties. So it's our professional planning opinion that the requested permission represents good land use planning. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sewer. Just a quick question for you. Do you by any chance have a table that summarizes what the existing condition might be and where there's either an enlargement or an improvement to that zoning standard?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I didn't include the table from the cover letter in here, but on slide 4, which is the site plan, might be a bit hard to see because it's on the site plan, but there is a zoning table on there that shows both the existing condition and the proposed condition.
I'm looking at your report here. It's not on page 4. So
oh, sorry. Just to clarify, slide 4 of the of the presentation. The page number that it's on is page 10.
10, okay, so I did find
Sorry
it.
for
All right,
that,
thank you.
yeah.
No, it's just, it's very helpful to capture all of this and to understand sort of what the movement is going to be on site. So thank you for that. Any questions from the members of the panel? Yes, Member Coakley.
Well, simply because this will become an issue later on in the presentations, I'm quite sure. We are advised by the material on file that the building is presently unoccupied, and indeed you indicate that it feels the need to be demolished. Can you indicate when it was last occupied and used as a residence?
Madam Chair, I believe the last occupancy of the building was somewhere around 2008 or 2009.
That's a long time. Can anybody tell us why that property has been remained unoccupied for that amount of time?
I say that as an approximate. It's through our correspondence with, in fact, the previous owner of the property, and they indicated that they ceased living at the property for a period of time before the property was sold in 2016 to the current owner.
Okay, so they held on to it. They actually advertised it for sale, sold it in 2016, and then the current owner left it for 8 years unoccupied. And do you know why that happened?
I hesitate to speak for the owner directly, but he was unsure how to proceed with the property at that time, and had reports prepared as well to assess the state of the building and its viability.
So
engineers' reports.
Is it the owner that's going to be moving into that new house?
I believe he's considering taking one of the properties for himself, but there will be 2 units.
Okay, so when he bought in 2016, it was for the purposes of redeveloping, correct? Not to move in.
I think he was weighing his options, but the purpose was development.
All right, thank you. That gives us a better picture of what the intent here was on the property. Okay, so any other questions from the members of the panel? Member Blatherwick? Yes, go ahead.
And this is to, I guess it's Miss Smith who wrote this report. Or Miss King, sorry. This is a permission application, I understand that. But I've also just heard Miss Sewer say that the lot coverage is going to be 27%. What is the maximum lot coverage in the R1C zone in Rockcliffe Park?
Thank you. I would just like to note that because the R1C zone, it doesn't permit a semi-detached dwelling, kind of going back to that this is a legal non-conforming building, so I don't have zoning standards for a semi-detached dwelling, but I can quickly pull up the standard if you'd like the lot coverage for a single, but like I mentioned-
Rockcliffe is Rockcliffe's one of the few neighborhoods in the city that has lot coverage provisions in the underlying bylaw.
So the maximum lot coverage for a single detached dwelling would be 33%. But like I mentioned, we don't have zoning standards for a semi-detached dwelling, which would likely provide different sets of standards.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Nope, you have a bit of a hole in your bylaw. Hopefully the new bylaw will address that. Nope, I'm fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from members of the panel? I have one for Ms. Sewer then. You're aware there's a number of comments and concerns, and we have members of the public here today. Can you tell me a little bit about your consultation on this proposal?
Madam Chair, I can speak to that as part of the design team for the project. And so we engaged with city heritage staff probably about 2 years ago, give or take, and began a consultation process at the early stages of design to determine what the the appropriate course of action from a design standpoint would be, given the understanding that it is legally non-conforming and not aligned with the bylaw of the neighborhood. And so we had extensive consultation with heritage staff and pre-consultations that included the resident association. We received formal comments from both parties, made revisions back and forth to the design over the course of that, again, that roughly 2-year period, to the point where we were prepared to make our heritage application at the end of last year.
All right, thank you. All right, anyone else? If not, then I'm going to go to our speakers list on this one. So just to our speakers, you are Susan Peterson? Okay, so you are on my list, and because you are with us already, I'm going to give you the floor. Go ahead. You've got 5 minutes. Thank you. Oh, just a minute. Who's, can I just ask who's joining you?
My apologies. Scott Hetherington. I'm
All right.
the president of the Community Association, 296 Buena Vista.
Okay,
So I'm just sitting here.
But he's on the list too.
Yes, he is. He is on the list. Mr. Hetherington, can I just make a request, since you are likely to be before us in the future? Could you please, if you have some concerns about being able to understand what's going on, could you make your comments to the chair the next time?
That's a very good point. I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Nope, that's fine. I just would appreciate if you would just do that in the future. Thank you. But with that said, Ms. Peterson, you go ahead.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Before the clock starts ticking, I ask that we had a chance, because 5 minutes and 5 minutes, we've really had to cut back what we wanted to say. So we would very much welcome questions and be able to explain things more to you at the end.
So Ms. Peterson, one of the reasons why I did put this item last is because I wanted to have more flexibility with regards to giving you some more time. So, you know, as long as you're staying on point and that there's progression in your comments, we're going to hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. I want to start by saying I've had over 20 years experience working with heritage districts throughout our city in an attempt to protect Ottawa's heritage. And I was intimately involved in the writing of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan. So I know this stuff very well. And that is why, in a sense, I'm going first here. Now, the owner, as you know, requires permission from this committee to enlarge the reconstruction of the existing non-conforming dwelling. We submit, as you know, that the Committee of Adjustment does not have jurisdiction to give that permission. The Planning Act permits such an expansion, quote, only if the use that was made of the building or structure on the day the bylaw was passed continued until the date of application before this committee. The building in question has not been used as a residence for decades. It has long been abandoned, uninhabited, and uninhabitable. The applicant has acknowledged that the dwelling, quote, has been neglected for many years and is in a state of disrepair. Engineering reports concluded that it cannot be salvaged. This is an egregious example of demolition by neglect. The building has been left to rot for 7 to 8 years under the current owner, and for my understanding is decades by the previous owner. We accept that the building cannot be saved. This is heartbreaking. This is a huge issue for Rockcliffe Park and more generally for heritage districts in Ottawa. The dwelling is among the most important heritage buildings in Rockcliffe Park. It is classified as what we call grade 1, the most important, and it occupies a prominent corner lot directly across from Rideau Hall. It is an integral part of the outstanding heritage value of Rockcliffe Park. The Government of Canada just recently recognized the importance of that heritage, not just to Ottawa, but to the country. It designated Rockcliffe Park a National Historic Site, a very rare honor for a district. We believe that there is a compelling case a straightforward case that the committee does not have jurisdiction with respect to this application. This distinction between occupancy and use. It has not been used as a residence for an incredibly long time and could not be used as one given its state of dereliction. If the committee believes that it does have jurisdiction, we submit that the proposed new development fails to meet the test set out by the Ontario Municipal Board that is referred to in the application. Namely, that the effect of any concession made must always be weighed in light of the impact it could have on neighboring properties, and it must be desirable for the appropriate development of the land. We know that some neighbors we know that neighbors generally are supportive of finally, after years, getting rid of the eyesore that years of neglect have made of this property. And we accept that, and we know something has to happen here. But we have a problem with a number of statements made in the staff report. It says on page 1, quote, "It appears to have minimal impacts on neighboring properties, as it is maintaining the existing use at an increased footprint and maintaining the existing height." We have a problem with another statement by heritage planning staff in the staff report. It says, "The proposed new building is larger in size than existing. However, heritage staff feel that the objectives of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan are being met." We could not disagree more. And we've had a tremendous amount of experience with this. And we will want to comment on what happened at the Built Heritage Committee when this was considered, because it seems that my colleague will comment more on this. But the fact of the matter is that the Committee of Adjustment is obliged by the provincial planning statement and by the Rockcliffe Park secondary plan to consider heritage things when it's relevant to a decision being made by this committee. So first, I want to turn to height. It is not the case, as the staff report says, that the new building maintains the existing height.
Go ahead,
The application indicates that the existing height of both dwellings is 10 meters and the proposed height is 10.5 meters. That's on the table on page 10. The footprint. The staff report refers to an increased footprint, but does not spell this out. We will. What is proposed is a dramatic increase in the footprint of the building. The lot coverage of one of the semi-detached buildings doubles in size. The other increases by about 1/3 in size, also on page 10. Combined, the proposed footprint is a whopping 60% larger than the existing one. Now, Rockcliffe Park is not ruled and governed by zoning bylaws. It's ruled and governed by the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan. We submit that it is impossible to increase a building's footprint by 60% and not have a significant impact on neighboring properties. They will be confronted by a much larger building buffered by correspondingly less greenscape. Now, setbacks. Some setbacks on the property are and will remain generous. This is typical of Rockcliffe. It is an essential part of Rockcliffe's heritage character. But the proposal is to reduce rear yard setbacks, already very small, to barely more than a meter from the property line, 1.5, 1.32 meters. The minimum setback required by zoning is 11 meters. The applicant claims that this will not have a negative impact on the neighboring property because it is currently a vacant lot. It is not a vacant lot. It is the backyard of another grade 1 house. Geo-Ottawa, you cannot rely on a line in Geo-Ottawa to tell you where lot lines end and begin. It is the backyard of another grade 1 house. So it will have a negative impact on that neighboring house. Now, I want to set out the wider adverse impact on the neighborhood. If the owners were permitted to replace this sadly neglected building with a much larger one, which if this is approved, they will be rewarded for their neglect. This will be a powerful incentive for others in Ottawa to engage in demolition by neglect. It will demonstrate that this can be an effective means to evade the protection of heritage in Ottawa. This is already a very serious issue in Rockcliffe, and we believe it would get worse. As my colleague will explain, we are facing what feels like an onslaught of demolition by neglect. So to conclude my presentation, you have before you proposed new dwellings that are higher than now, with rear yard setbacks reduced to almost nothing, and a dramatic increase in size is indicated by the whopping 60% increase in footprint. We submit that we have demonstrated that the proposed development fails to meet the test articulated by the OMB. The impact it could have on neighboring properties is negative indeed, and the wider impact on the neighborhood by incentivizing demolition by neglect could be devastating. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson, for being so well prepared here today. I take, you know, all of your points. You know, there's merit in a lot of what you've presented. I do have one question for you though. If that lot has been an eyesore since I think we heard 2008, quite possibly.
From before that, I've asked the previous owner exactly when they vacated that property. It's been vacant for one hell of a long time. Anyway, go ahead, please.
So, you know, we're now at a point where somebody's doing something with a lot.
Yes.
And I know, you know, maybe there's a number of elements that go against some of the policies that you've outlined. But wouldn't that, in your opinion, still be a benefit to the community?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think it's a very key question. Our position is, and we're supported hook, line, and sinker by Heritage Ottawa on this, and that is, if a house gets demolished because it's been neglected, the owners should be required to replace that house with a house that is the same footprint, the same height, and captures the heritage, the key heritage attributes that are being destroyed through demolition. So yes, replace the house, but do not make it bigger and do not make it higher. And our heritage plan requires that if a house, if something is being demolished and it was a house of this significance, that the key heritage characteristics of that house be replaced, be restored. So the thing is, yes, it would be much better to have something there than what the heck is there now. But if these sorts of requirements are not required, if our heritage plan is not respected in every way, when it comes to demolition by neglect, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So yes, we're just saying, do it. By all means, do it, but keep to the footprint, keep to the height, and restore some of the key characteristics of it. That would be in keeping with our heritage plan. It's a grade 1 house.
So
and grade 1 houses set the model for what should for new buildings.
And did you attend the meeting of the Heritage Committee?
Yes.
And did they respond? Did you have? And maybe this is going to be Mr. Davidson, is it? Sorry.
Hetherington.
Hetherington, sorry, Hetherington. My apologies.
The rude man that
interrupted
it.
So, and maybe that'll be part of your presentation, but I do want to hear a little bit more about what happened at that committee and whether or not your concerns were responded to. So how about we go to you then,
Yes.
Mr. Hetherington, and we'll give you your 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
I'm new to planning. I served abroad and I've retired, been in Rockcliffe a long time, but I'm not very conversant on things. I went to the Built Heritage meeting and I thought it was a very full and frank exchange. I mean, we heard from all sides and I think everybody's views were aired out at the meeting. And obviously we weren't in complete agreement with what happened, but what the city staff and tried to present all sides of the thing. The city councilors were a bit split, but I think they tried to accommodate all the viewpoints. And at the end, they directed staff to sit down with the owners and the architects and the builders to revisit the plan, but to preserve something that was a similar mass, footprint, and preserve the green space. And they also expressed the concern that the design of the new house be more sympathetic to the existing design. So I thought that was a very good process, a hard issue. Everybody was upset about the situation we were in, but I think we came to a point where city staff were directed to sit down with the owners and really try to accommodate the community and to make a considered decision that kind of suited as best we could everybody. Unfortunately, that process was off in a corner. That was the city staff sitting down with the owner. No one ever came back to the community. So I think the feeling of my neighbors is we're really happy that they're going to rehabilitate this property. We're going to have a new building. I think we accept a lot of aspects about what will come, but complete silence on what was decided in camera virtually. So a lack of transparency. So that's our real concern. How did we get to a point after that direction from city staff to have such a large building replace the existing one? So I think in a nutshell, that's the best I can do.
Oh, could I, if I may?
Go ahead.
Add to that. Unlike a quasi-judicial tribunal, Built Heritage Committee has to always be concerned with whether or not what they recommend is going to be accepted by City Council. The fact of the matter is, owners and developers have lots of legal staff, they have lots of lobbyists and all the rest of it. So they're concerned. For what happened there is that the members of the Built Heritage Committee said that this is heartbreaking, what's happening here. It should not happen. They toyed and back and forth, should we just reject this? As we and Heritage Ottawa said, you've got to reject this. And they went back and forth, and it was very interesting to me because it bespeaks a lot of who's got power and what have you. They were afraid that if they rejected it and it went to council and it was just say reject, that City Council may not go along with that and they would accept what was proposed. And they couldn't, Built Heritage Committee could not accept what was being proposed. So they direct staff to go back and work on mass, work on height, work on footprint, work on the design of the thing and come back to us. City staff Heritage staff, excluding us, sat down with the applicant and came back, and they accommodated the members of the Heritage Committee to the extent that they they increased one of the setbacks by 7 inches. 7 inches. Every mass, forget it, height, forget it, design, forget it. This is what went to City Council and was approved. So let me put it this way. The Built Heritage Committee was most unhappy with what was going on. And when Heritage staff, in their professionalism, comes back and says, okay, we'll work with you. You reduce this by 7 inches. And boy, that's okay. It's not okay. That's why you are a quasi-judicial tribunal. You do not have to worry about whether City Council and lobbyists and everything else are going to get at you. That's why we think you have to consider the heritage aspects of this quite apart from what I've said. and you were going to, in fact, get into the fact that it does not respect our heritage plan.
All right,
It does
thank you.
not.
I do appreciate that overview. I'm sure we're gonna give a chance to the other side, obviously, to provide their comments as well. You know, we're not part of that heritage review process, so, you know, we very much rely on the recommendations that come from them. So, but that said, thank you. I'm going to ask any members from the panel have any questions for either Mrs. Peterson or Mr. Hetherington? Member Coakley?
I think maybe this question has implicitly been answered, but I'll try asking it anyway. You know, our role is not to punish nor to reward. We are a quasi-judicial tribunal. Our role is to, you know, apply the law as best we see fit in our interpretation of it. So sort of, I mean, on the one hand, I take your point about rewarding in quotes, people who let, and please, I'm not casting aspersions about the current owner. I don't know what the current owner of the property has done, and you know, but letting people let a piece of, well, let's use 24 Sussex Drive as an example. Letting a property just go to pot. Clearly, we should not be in the business of rewarding that sort of activity, but then I'm not entirely sure we should be in the business of punishing someone who's attempting to, you know, address that sort of situation. I think maybe I heard you suggest that the solution to that, you know, and I'm not sure we have the power to do this, but the solution to that is to require that where a property has been allowed to go to pot like that and is subject to a heritage designation, that the solution is to require that it be rebuilt in its previously existing form, you know, as best you can build something new today that to replace something that was maybe built 100 years ago. Is that a fair understanding on my part of your view? Admittedly, given a very rambling, you know, comment on my part.
I get it. Our view is our heritage plan says that if you're building a new house in Rockcliffe Park, you look at the grade 1 house there nearest, and that sets the limits. Now, this is a grade 1 house. It's standing there. So we say that this is an unusual situation, not directly contemplated by any heritage plan. But what you have to do is look at what the heritage plan says and says, okay, it's the grade 1 house that sets the limits. This is a grade 1 house, so we are suggesting that it should set the limits on the height, on the mass, on the footprint, and that would be in keeping with our heritage plan. Our heritage plan, I have it here, but I don't want to look up where, but it also says, do you have it there, Scott, about attributes? If you've got important heritage attributes of a building, where is it? Here. Demolition of grade 1 buildings. Okay. The Rockcliffe Heritage Plan specifies that existing materials and extensively deteriorated or missing parts of character-defining elements of the structure be replaced in kind. And to go on, this has half timbering. It requires that half timbering and other features associated with what is the Tudor revival style shall be retained. The proposed new development does not meet this requirement. There's 2 architectural features that remain, but many that are not. And so that's why our heritage plan says this is what you should do. So it's not that we just make it up, I assure you. Grade 1 properties, as I say, set the parameters of height, mass, setbacks, and green space. Now, so this is a 60% larger footprint. This is not following our heritage plan. Okay. So we don't think that therefore it meets the conditions set out by the Ontario Municipal Board. that it's proper for the neighboring, properties, and that it's proper for the neighborhood. We, as far as we're concerned, it isn't and can't be. So it's
So,
not
Ms.
that you
Peterson,
replicate it, it's just
I'd
that
like
you
to
follow this.
I'm going to give somebody another chance. So
Yeah,
is there anybody else on the panel who would like to ask a question? Either Ms. Peterson or Mr. Hetherington? Okay. So thank you both for your time today and for being well prepared and for providing us with the depth of background that you certainly have on the heritage side. Is there anyone else in the audience, either here in person or online, who would like to speak to this application? Do we have anybody else coordinated? No? Okay. So with that then, there's a lot to discuss still. So Ms. Sewell, Mr. Duckworth, you have heard a lot of this discussion. So we'd like to hear from you with regards to the revisions to the plan and the consultation that was undertaken.
Speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So reference was made to the discussion that took place during the Built Heritage conversation, and Mr. Hetherington's characterization of that as being a robust discussion is quite accurate. Ultimately, the recommendation from Built Heritage was made and council approved, but in terms of the condition that was placed on that approval, that was recommended by Built Heritage and carried forward by council in their approval of the application, was a specific requirement to revisit the proposed cladding of the building. It didn't speak to revisiting mass or revisiting setbacks or revisiting height. None of that was placed. There was no condition placed on the decision or on the recommendation from Built Heritage with respect to any of those things. It's very specific what was added. And it was that the applicant continue to work with heritage staff, city heritage staff, to review the cladding of the proposed building, that it could be made more sympathetic to the existing building. And so that mention was made of that being a closed door process that residents were left out of. And the reality was the condition, and I believe the condition was brought forward by the chair of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. The condition was worded that it be a coordination between the applicant and city staff. And so that's what took place. And we went through that process where we provided them a variety of options of refinements to the cladding. Heritage staff indicated which they felt was the most appropriate, and that is ultimately what was amended. It was architectural detailing in terms of the character of the final presentation, as opposed to any mandate from the decision or condition that we revisit the building mass. The site plan that's before you and part of our application process is identical to the one that was approved by council. So with respect to the requirements that were suggested that we alter the building mass in any way, that wasn't a part of what came out of that process.
All right, thank you very much for that. I just wanted to come back to one thing about from Ms. Peterson that raised right from the get-go, the issue about jurisdiction. So as you know, there's a difference between something that's occupied continuously versus something that is a use continuously. So I think, I'm going to guess that one of the best ways to gauge some of this, and I'm looking for planning staff's help here a little bit, is it would have been one thing if the house had been taken down and then the lot had been returned to being truly vacant, for which vacant taxes would have been not vacant taxes in the vacant tax issue we have right now, but rather that the taxes would have been paid for use identified as vacant as opposed to use identified as residential. So can you just confirm to me that that was likely the case, that in fact the residential taxes continued to be paid on that property over time?
Madam Chair, I believe so. I haven't spoken specifically to the owner on that, but it's been a property under his ownership. And so, yes, the property taxes would have been carried forward without pause.
And just a planning staff, is that, how do you, so when you look at that, well, how do you make that determination for continuous use?
Thank you for the question. I will ultimately defer to Simran if she wants to clarify further as well, but from planning staff interpretation, because the use when it was occupied at the time was like a semi-detached dwelling and it was operating as a semi-detached dwelling. Even though it's been unoccupied by a resident, it's still continuing and that's still being proposed to be a semi-detached dwelling. So I don't see a change of use from point A to point B. Understandably, it appears someone hasn't been living in there for some time, but from what I understand, it's still a semi. It hasn't changed from a semi in that midpoint. It's still going from a semi to a semi, if that clarifies.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Soar, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would have a similar interpretation that the use is continuing regardless of whether the property is vacant or occupied. I can also do, I'm not sure if Mr. Chown is available to provide any further clarification, but that is my understanding of the way that a residential use is interpreted, is it's separate from occupancy of the property.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, any other questions? No, the public portion is now done, Ms. Peterson. We're not going to get into.
Yeah.
I would not think of opening my mouth again if it weren't for that.
I'm giving you a minute.
Thank you. I have here at the end of the Built Heritage Committee meeting, the direction to staff to concur or to meet with the applicant was not about cladding. Heritage staff were directed to work with the applicant to reduce the mass and footprint of the proposed house, thereby preserving more of the green space. And they expressed concern for the need for the design of the house to be more sympathetic.
And where's that
about cladding? I don't know.
Can you tell me where that's from? What's that? What's your source?
This is the directions that the city heritage staff were given by the Built Heritage Committee.
So is that their decision? Is that the
Yes.
formal? Okay, can we have, like, could you leave that with us as evidence?
I've got it here, but I will have to get the proper piece of paper. But yes, that's what they were directed to do.
All right, if you're telling me that that was actually the wording in the actual decision, then we need that piece of evidence. Mr. Duckworth, can you confer?
I'll just weigh in. The decision I was referring to was ultimately the decision we received from council. And if the recommendation document from the Built Heritage Subcommittee, if I may be misremembering some of the wording there, we did continue to coordinate with staff after that took place. And I know that there was many back and forths with staff that resulted in alterations to the building mass. And to be honest, I don't recall if all of those happened before or after the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting, because they took place as a continuous coordination. But with respect to the conditions that were placed on the final decision that was approved by City Council, the condition regarding the cladding was the piece that came out of that.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to give you now, unless there's any last questions from committee members. Ms. Soar, giving you the last 2 minutes to close off, because I can tell you it's going to be reserved. So yeah, 2 minutes. Go ahead, please.
As expected, Madam Chair. I just wanted to address a few of the comments that were made by the community association, the residents association, before I conclude. In terms of the issue of demolition by neglect, I would just like to remind the committee that that is not something that is to be addressed by the committee. That's not something that's part of the 2 tests. That's outside of the scope of the committee of adjustment. Also wanted to reiterate that there was no concerns raised from the neighbor to the north, either in this process. We didn't receive any comments from that neighbor. And my understanding is that it was also not, we did not receive concerns during the heritage permit process. with respect to the comments that were made about the proposed new semi-detached being replicating what already exists on the property, I would just remind or direct committee members to the Rockcliffe Heritage District Plan in section 7.4.2 guidelines for new buildings. Number 4 states new buildings shall be of their own time, but sympathetic to character of the historic neighborhood in terms of massing height and materials. New buildings are not required to replicate historical styles. So I would reiterate to committee that it's not the Heritage Conservation District Plan does not direct buildings that are new buildings, whether or not it's demolished building, to replicate it. New buildings should be sympathetic to the character of the Heritage Conservation District. And it's my understanding that we have a heritage permit. It was a 2-year process working with heritage staff to come to a place where they were comfortable recommending that a heritage permit proceed. The heritage matters for this particular site and this property were dealt with by heritage staff as part of the heritage permit application. They are not within the purview of a permission application. That is a separate application with 2 tests. And it's my belief and planning staff's belief that the 2 tests for a permission application are met. The proposal, as I've reiterated, has a heritage permit. It's been deemed through an iterative process to be in line with the character and to be desirable for this area and for this property. And the impacts are relatively minor, just as I reiterated in my presentation, the location at the end of the street, that setback, that reduced rear yard setback, it reads as a corner side yard setback when you're looking at the property. The semi-detached are facing Minto Place. They're facing Lisgar Road. That rear yard setback is a technical rear yard setback. It's reads as a corner side yard setback. So that impact in terms of streetscape is relatively minor. And again, with respect to lot coverage, there are examples in the neighborhood where there's similar lot coverage. So this isn't out of character with the neighborhood. It will maintain the character of the Rockcliffe Park neighborhood as determined by heritage planning staff. And so I would urge you to approve, obviously, understanding you will be reserving, but to ultimately approve this application. It's our professional planning opinion that this meets the 2 tests under the Planning Act for a permission application. And it's also the belief and the professional planning opinion of both city planning staff and heritage planning staff that it meets those tests. So yeah, I would just reiterate that, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sewer. Thank you to our participants as well for coming in today. It's been a long meeting. So thanks. I think that takes us, we are reserving. I think that takes us to the end of our agenda. We have no other items. So unless there's any other business, we are adjourned. So thank you.